Hey everybody, it's Thomas. It's time to talk about some Blood Bowl. We're doing Blood Bowl League of Blood Bowl, of course. Now you may be noticing, hey, you're on a calendar screen, but there's a big empty space here. What's with that? Why is it so weird? It's a pretty simple, straightforward answer to that, which is the season's over. Yes, season 1 wrapped up, all done, complete. Let's take a look at how we ended up, shall we? Rankings. A little bit skewed here, but Chris came in first, then Mark, then me. Records are the same, and then Blood Bowl does tiebreakers based on team value, which kind of makes sense, but Andrew came in fourth, and then the rest you can see here. I went through and watched my old videos and saw how my predictions went. I ended up with a 43.75 prediction accuracy, which I feel like is pretty good for not really knowing too much about how games would play out and not even factoring in ties as a potential possibility. Just kind of how it went. Let's take a look at some Hall of Fame stuff here. Actually, let's talk a little bit more about rankings before I get too far away here. So I went through. I mean, these aren't quite super accurate. Part of that is we had a lot of forced ties this season and one forfeit in there as well. The forced ties are especially bad last week, where only one game got played, which is a little sad for everybody. That's why there's no gameplay video for me, because my game against Dwarves never happened. Just kind of how it goes. But if we take out all of the forced ties and the forfeits and all that fun stuff, we can kind of get a better sense about who did the best on the games they played. If we look at the actual points based on that, or actual records, I should say. I mean, Mark played all of his games, so he doesn't change. Chris's record changed to 4-1-1. My record changes to 5-2-1. Andrew changes to 3-2-2. 2-2-1, 2-1-2, 0-3-2. 1-2-4, 1-0-4, and then 0-2-5 for records there. So actual points, if you do it that way, you break everybody's record out. It goes Mark, then me, then Chris. Chris had fewer points overall than Mark and myself, because Mark and I each had an additional win, and the way wins work, it just totals up more. So having the ties doesn't really affect it too much. If you average it out over the number of games played, which is kind of a fair way to equalize it, things get flipped quite a bit. Chris is back to being number 1. I come in second, no matter what there, and then Mark comes in third. But again, it's a very narrow amount. I think the average points is within one. I can look right now. It's 0.17 within each other, so nothing too large in terms of variance there. So I mean, the top teams are pretty close, and then the rest are kind of below that. Actually, kind of interesting is that the Necromantic team technically beats Andrew if you average out their points per game, but only by just a little bit there as well. So let's take a look at the Hall of Fame, the final Hall of Fame here, and then we'll start talking about some weirder stats, I guess, that a little stranger. Most experienced player, a Lizard team member. A little surprising there, but that one scored a lot of touchdowns. It's not the end of the world. The Ogre, the poor injured Ogre, comes in there as well. And then a bunch of us, all the same here. Best scorers end up going, not too surprisingly, between the Dark Elves, me, and the Human team, followed closely by other teams that placed highly. Again, not too surprising that the teams that end up at the top of the chart end up with the most scoring potential power. Actually, something to talk about there. If we look at, well, yeah, let's go into this, and we'll get into more weird stat things. Best thrower is Mark's team, because they threw a lot. This is a little thrown because I believe this also calculates in dump-off passes, which is a little strange, but what can I say? Everyone else doesn't pass nearly as much. Not too surprising considering how bashy of a league it was. Interceptions had 3 total for this whole season. If we take a look at injuries, Andrew's gigantic Bloodthirster did the most damage. Then we have the Werewolf of Doom. We've got some human players. This is, I want to say, the Death Roller. I'm not 100% sure though. This is the flesh column, I think. These are, let's see here. These two are Nurgle Warriors, and this one's a Pestiger, and then these guys in there as well. Best runner went to my team. It just means I had the most yards running overall, lumped into that player, and then some other players in there. Kind of interesting here to see Mark's team not quite as high down there, but if you factor in the fact that they pass more, it makes a little more sense that they'd have fewer yards run overall. And then, yeah, not too surprising here that the teams that place the best are going to have some of the best running. Take a look here. Best throwing. Mark in his passing game, especially on the one thrower that he really emphasized the most. With a few other ones in there, I love that the dwarves are on here because they shouldn't be passing at all, but you know, he was just going for it. Survivors still means nothing because who cares? And then a fair amount of hits went on here for actual deaths, which is pretty impressive. Catches, dwarfs being on here, still great. Not surprising that the Dark Elf team has a lot of players on here. Same with Mark though. These are just teams that threw are the teams that managed to score in there. So let's kind of drill down, talk about some weird stats here. So what I did, because I want to kind of get an idea of how teams did, but didn't want to skew things too badly, just because like Mark's team, he's going to get the highest stats for everything, just because that's how it ends up looking, because he played the most games, so he's going to have the most numbers available. Not terribly surprising there whatsoever. So I went out and averaged those out by game as well, and if we take a look at those, Chris's team actually ended up with the kind of the highest offensive power. If we take a look, this is kind of a rough way you can see it, but it doesn't factor in his players that have been removed, shall we say. But he had the most touchdowns per game, which isn't too surprising given how much scoring power he had overall. He also has the tied for most passes per game with Mark's team, which is also then has a little bit higher overall catches for the game. Doesn't have very far passes, but has a lot of passing and catching nonetheless, and has the highest amount of run-in yards overall. And then if we look at Mark's team, sort of next in line here. Mark, like I said, tied for passing, had second for most touchdowns overall. Again, best team, one of the best teams in the league, first, second, or third, depending on how you calculate it out. Not too surprising that he would end up with the most touchdowns, especially given like this game. Where do we go here? Where he scored 4 touchdowns. That's gonna swing things just a little bit. But yeah, Mark had the most. Tied for most passing, second most catches in the league, had the most amount of yards passing, also not too surprising. And also had the fewest yards run, which again, also kind of makes sense in terms of everything like that. My team actually did pretty poorly stats-wise, which is weird considering how well I placed overall. I had the third most amount of touchdowns, which again, makes sense, but the shortest catching pass yards, no, that's going to be really low because I'll pass. Had the third highest running. I thought I'd have at least the second, but the Undead team actually ran a lot more than I did, which I think is mostly due to just them getting the ball and then not being able to capitalize on it, which is actually, another thing I wanted to talk about was drive success, which is looking at the amount of yards run without scoring. So if we take a look, where did we go? Best runners. So, we've got a lot of yards run here, but just because you run a lot doesn't mean you're scoring a lot per se. So if we look at that, Mark actually has the most successful offensive potential drive success because of his passing game. He has a higher ratio of touchdowns between yards run, which I think is a fair way to do it because passing basically shortens the field. Chris has the second highest overall successful scoring power, which makes sense. Without the passing game of Mark, he has to run a little bit more to do things. And then the third place team, I assumed was going to be me when I was calculating this out, and I'm pretty close. But the actual team with most is the Necromantic team, which kind of makes sense because he was able to pick up the ball a lot downfield and run it in from there as well. if we break out the the injuries a little bit here, Andrew, despite having top of the charts, did not end up having the most power overall for the remover. The necromantic team, that stupid werewolf, had a lot of power there. Is he even on here? Yeah, he's not. Oh yeah, I think that's him. So yeah, this werewolf injured a lot of people, killed a lot of people, KO'd a lot of people. Looking over the teams a little bit, we can kind of see we're a pretty bashy league overall. So I wanted to look at, and I know the Amazon team suffered, and the Lizard team actually as well, suffered a lot of injuries. If we actually break out the casualties and deaths and KO sustained, which includes just falling over, Amazon's top of the charts, and then Andrew's team actually came in second for the most likely to be injured after falling down, by a pretty significant margin over the Lizard team, which is kind of surprising, considering how much damage the Lizard team actually ended up taking in there. I ended up with the most tackles, which is kind of interesting because this isn't a very dodgy league, and my tackles are almost like double most other teams. The second place team is a full tackle per game less. I'm almost double the raw number of tackles Mark has, and that's with playing one less game. So that's pretty nuts there. Any other statistics that I thought was pretty interesting? Failed dodges, I guess. I thought it was going to be Chris because Dark Elves are very... let's get in here. Dark Elves with their... for agility, you're going to succeed a lot. It's pretty, and especially with 5 people, it's pretty rare that they will end up failing dodges, but when they do, they fail pretty hard. The most failed dodges went to the Amazon team, which kind of comes down to just, I guess, being in bad spots and getting a couple games where they got tackled a lot. And then, let's see here, other failed dodges. Yeah, then Mark's team, because Mark likes to dodge out a lot, because why not? And then Chris's team, which is what you can say. Chris only got third failed dodges, which I thought would be surprised. But Mark and Chris are basically the same amount. There's a slight statistical variation there. I would say that the couple of things that surprised me, the Dwarf team had the third highest passing yards, which, Dwarf shouldn't pass whatsoever. Not nearly as well as like the Amazon player that actually has dedicated positional passers. No, the Dwarf team, which has really low agility except for a couple of people, the runners and the blitzers, managed to get the throws off. So sometimes rolling sixes is all you really need to do. Yeah, that's weird. I will also say, I talked a lot about how the Dwarf team wasn't played super optimally. It's the Beginners League. It's going to happen. But even then, despite making some questionable plays, especially early on, before he really figured out the basics of the game, the Dwarf team managed to rack up the most kills, injuries, and KOs. Third place, but the only team to really place super high in all 3 categories, aside from the Necromantic team, which is, just leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else on that department, thanks to the werewolves doing a lot of damage. Let's see here. Anything else? Any other final recap thoughts that we can think of? Not in particular. This season was pretty good for a season 1 for Beginners League. We ended up, kind of trailing off in terms of people actually playing games. We had more forced ties than I would have actually liked, but nobody played less than 5 games, so everybody played more than half of their games. I mean, barely, but everybody accomplished the halfway point for playing all their games, so that's really good. Most people played 7 to 8 games, so that's awesome. Yeah, pretty exciting for what's going to happen. Season 2, a bunch of these players are going to be leaving us, and we'll be getting some new players, and they'll be interesting there. I guess overall thoughts, the league ended up being extremely bashy, which definitely skewed a lot of data. And if the Amazon team maybe had a better couple early weeks, they might have done a lot better, I think. I think the week 1 forfeit probably hurt them almost more than anything. Chris benefited not that much from that, but the Amazon team was hurt a lot. Mark played a very solid game overall. Having humans that can do pretty much everything will do that. I definitely learned a lot playing a team like this. I definitely learned a lot playing against real people instead of the computer. which is obviously going to make sense. They're just going to be different. But learn more strategies, learn different things about Nurgle. They're a really defensive team and really annoying. I really did not expect the base skills here to do a lot for me, but they did. They did quite a bit for me. I was shocked how much foul appearance really helped out. Regeneration, not so much, but foul appearance put in a lot of work. A 1-6 chance, but it happens often enough, I guess. That's why I don't like to go for it, so I shouldn't be that surprised. Andrew, same sort of thing, played very well. Part of that was the might of the Bloodthirster and being able to just tear up with this Claw, Frenzy, Mighty Blow combination. Just absolutely powered through a lot of this. He built very well, he played very well, and that's, not knowing a whole lot, not having a lot of time to practice. It did great. Necromantic team, the Werewolves, I said this in a bunch of early recaps, but the Werewolves ended up being a huge deal, especially this guy. There's a reason why he's level 3. It's all of this information. I wonder if we can take a look at the season stats here. Yeah, he just did a lot of plays. He hit a lot of people. He tackled a ton of people. He just made a lot of work. And then everyone else kind of just filled in. This White definitely did a lot as well. So, Necromantic team, I really underestimated that team going into this league, and I think I was surprised to see how well they did. The Lizardmen team probably had the worst luck, I think, of anybody. Ryan played extremely well once he got a better handle on the game. He was able to move these skinks around quite a bit and definitely exploited their abilities, but just was not able to translate that into much because he had a ton of kills on like Sauruses and just had a couple bad weeks. His opening build wasn't very good either, and I think that definitely hampered him overall, but a lot of bad luck there as well. Undead team kind of just didn't have much of a factor. I think he didn't do a lot of team management. Yeah, 390. He didn't do pretty much any team management. I think held him back quite a bit. Mummy power definitely saw him through a lot. And, more team management I think would have helped him out more. The Chaos team, the lack of early rerolls hurt him so much. Like, now this team looks fantastic. But early on, he was not doing great in no small part because, well, he didn't have the rerolls to make his games go easier. So, I don't know. He definitely played great, though. Once he got his rerolls going, he was a much more stable team. But the lack of early rerolls certainly hurt him. I think that's why he ended up placing so poorly. The Amazon team, like we talked about, just got super injured. Like, all these red numbers. I mean, Amazons are going to get injured. This low armor value is just going to make it happen. But the early week 1 forfeit, maybe some questionable choices in development, some lack of purchases. He didn't end up playing a ton of his games, but he was just hindered by not being able to accomplish enough. That's why he ended up losing as much as he did. Dwarf has one of the... I think it's a testament to how powerful the Dwarf team is that they were able to do as much damage as they did despite being executed so poorly. He, first few matches clearly did not know what was going on rules-wise and made tons of simple mistakes. You can kind of see that in some of these blowout wins here. But, did manage to post the touchdown eventually. But, I think with a little more practice, he could have done better with the Dwarf team. But I also feel like this wasn't the team for him. I think like an Elf team probably been better. Big ball movement seemed to be more what he was interested in doing. And the Dwarf team is not the team to do that. So, fun season overall. Season 2 will start up soon-ish. I'll let you guys know when that's going to happen. Post some videos for that. And, yeah, should be exciting. This season we did, a single round robin, no playoffs. Next season I think we're going to end up doing a double round robin because we're going to have fewer players and then a playoff series. So it should be a little bit longer, but it should be much more exciting and more games because more people are going to be playing them. So, hope you enjoyed that. My name's Thomas. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.